All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to the March 23rd special Board of Education meeting to discuss our proposed transportation propositions and budget discussion. So I would like to call that meeting to order and recommended action that the Board of Education approves the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Oppose? Abstain? Motion carried. All right, so as I mentioned, the purpose of tonight's meeting is for the board to be able to discuss and deliberate our proposed propositions for transportation for the 2021-2022 budget. And at first, I would really just like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of the Bus Electrification Task Force, our community stakeholders, and our administration, particularly Rochelle O'Mara, who's joining us this evening, for providing the board with such an abundance of information and research and all of the hard work that you have put into taking a look at this. So I think to begin with, I think it would be helpful for us as a board to sort of take a look at the big picture, make sure we are all in consensus with regard to that, sort of think about what it is, and where we as a district want to be going with regard to electrifying our transportation. And then from there, we can move into the how and what we will talk about too with regard to propositions. So really tonight is an opportunity for us to talk and to deliberate. So administration doesn't have a presentation prepared for us as such. And really, if there's anyone who wants to sort of jump in and let us know your thoughts. Andrea?
I was going to say, I saw your email just prior to coming online, and I actually feel that I don't have enough of a grasp of everything to start deliberating and talking about it. I would like to hear a little bit from the administration, a little bit. Have them kind of walk us through. I mean, I don't know if I'm in the minority, but that we've been talking about different ways of approaching this nut, so to speak, and I'm not. Well, I mean, the information kind of came to us pretty quickly. So, yeah, Neil, I know you're on the task force, so if you could,
if I may, I think there really are several steps to take, which the big picture before we go on to discussing some of the specifics. And I have questions about certain of the specifics before we decide what to do and whether to follow the suggestion of multiple propositions or whatever. But I think the first issue is, do we believe as a board, and do we therefore want the district to pursue electrification of the bus fleet at this time as rapidly as we can reasonably do so? That's really question number one. And if our determination is yes, we want to do it, and I'll go for a second and say why I talk about now. Then our second question, I think, is going to be, all right, do we want to do that to the exclusion of purchasing any fossil fuel vehicle from this day forward? And what are the ramifications of making that decision if we were to do that? What are our ramifications for the business that we need to do as a school district. The third is if we've answered 1 and 2, and the answer to 2 could be, it does not necessarily depend on 3. What are some of the specific strategies in terms of presentation or in terms of referenda that we wish to put before the voters, and in what order and with what contingencies or conditions, which is going to be dependent on probably the answer to 2, and certainly the answer to 1. If we don't want to go electric now, then we're done. So that's kind of how I see an approach, and the input from administration would be helpful in each of those 3 questions, or each of these phases. So if that's kind of a roadmap on how to proceed with the the big picture discussion at first, and Sarah, I know you had proposed that. I think perhaps we ought to get that done, right, and have that discussion.
Well, and I think, I think that was my point. So I think our first, the first question that we need to answer is that big picture question, right? It is electrification, the making the transition to electrification the way we want the district to be moving, and making sure that we are all on the same page on that sort of first essential question before we move on to the house, and that's something that really we have to answer as a board versus administration.
Sure.
I would say that we have answered that question. We answered that question over a year ago, and said that that's where we wanted to go. We were hoping that, with the idea that we would do it as soon as possible. I can't tell you which meeting it was, but I know it was over a year ago, maybe closer to 2 years ago.
Right. And so, and like I said, essentially, I just want to make sure everyone is still, we are all on the same page, because to your point, we really can't start to discuss the house until we are, we know we're all on the same page, and this is the direction we're moving. So what are the next steps we have to take, and what are the ramifications of taking those steps now?
And I just want to respond a little bit to what Andrea said, because we made that decision a year ago, and in kind of a vacuum, to the extent that we had not really looked at the subject in detail. That's why we have a bus electrification task force. We have a report that has been submitted to the board. It provides information about technology and about finances. So we could conceivably look at that and say, you know what? It's just too expensive, and it's there's not enough evidence out there of other districts going in that direction. We don't want to do it now. I'm not saying that that's how I feel, but I think the touch point is, after what we've learned in the last 6 months or 12 months, do we want to go forward with focus on electrification?
So Neil, I would just, I agree what you're saying, but I would just put it in the context, and I don't know if everybody would be in agreement with me, that after saying, based on the situation of climate change, that as a board, we said that's where we should go, but it's really about the how and how fast that's up in the air. I don't, after reading everything and getting all the information, I think that's the one thing that's still open. I personally feel that, the decision stays the same, but it's just the how and how fast that we're looking at this point.
Other thoughts, Brian?
Yeah. Can we just all decide if that's a thing that we would like, given the contingency that it is possible and affordable? is that what we would like? I don't know if that's if we're circling around that sort of basic question, because we all did answer that question. Yes, we think that that's where we want to go, depending on technology, depending on availability of finances, depending on the realistic possibility. So I think we all, if I remember correctly, we all said, yeah, we think that we want to do that. Of course, it's not binding a year ago. However, now we have lots of information. All of us have lots of information from both the administration and many other sources. Are we ready at this point? I know I am, but are we ready at this point to say yes or no? We still think we want to do this. Now let's discuss is it possible and how could we do it? Is that appropriate right now? Because I don't know how much more
I
That
people
is
think
need
the
to
so.
hear.
question on the table right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I could say I think we're ready. And the thing that, I was, historically I tend to be a very environmentalist thinker. And I was in favor of this, but I was also super cautious about the risks involved. I feel much better about the risks involved now than I did a year ago. And I feel that, and really one of the things that has swayed me over that now is the time, now is an okay time to get started, is some of the information that we've learned about total cost of ownership. And that, yes, it's going to cost us more up front, but I think that in the long run, we come out ahead. And that's sort of where my thoughts are. And so I think we should move forward, and that's where I
Okay.
am on it.
Well, you get my vote too. I want to move forward with this discussion as, unless there is some compelling reason not to move along in this direction, then I also want to do so.
Iris? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Iris. No, well, Iris, you want to go first? No. Okay.
I was just polling people. You
Fine,
can go next.
Fine. I agree we should move forward. My concern, it has always been that and I continue to articulate it, that our first responsibility in this discussion is to ensure that we are able to provide transportation to every student that we need to provide transportation to. Okay. The second concern that I see is we must make sure that we can do it within, if we are going to move in this direction, without taking away from our core responsibility to provide instruction, education for our students. So I don't want to do this if it means that we lose teachers and we lose, our education suffers. I am convinced, the how is going to be the third part of that. I am convinced that it is time to move forward in this endeavor. And the first two are not insurmountable obstacles. The one concern that I have had is that electrification of school buses is really in its infancy. There are demonstration projects that states have been doing. Some states are further along than us, but it's really not, we would be really leading. There are no other districts in New York that I'm aware of who have said wholeheartedly, we want to go on the process by which in X years, our fleet will be electrified. That being said, a lot of things are changing. And I looked at it that as time goes on, we're probably going to be in a situation where costs are going to come down. Availability is going to come. More people are going to join the bandwagon, if you want to call it that. And then, we will be a leader. And I think it is appropriate for us to do that with the information that I've seen.
Andrea?
Well, I'm definitely for it. I mean, the one area that we haven't really talked about is the reason why we are doing it, which is for the health and welfare of our students, our community, of the planet. I think it's really important that we look at it through the lens of sustainability. That's really the driving force behind all of this. I also think that, as Josh was saying, that it appears to be quite doable, especially because, as you know, Neil, you were saying that of course we wouldn't want to do it if we're losing a teacher, but this is outside of the tax cap. This would not be affecting the tax cap.
Well,
So,
it can affect the tax cap.
Right.
If we do borrowing more, that's going to have an effect on the,
Right.
Well, before we get
determination
to
of it.
that,
But
I'm sorry
that
to
doesn't
interrupt,
change.
but before
Yeah.
we get into the how, I think we can at least all talk about,
Right.
do
But I'm
we
just
or
saying,
do we
do
not
we wanna
even
do
want
it?
to have this
right, but I just
conversation?
wanted to address the fact that this isn't money that's coming out of program to pay for it. I just wanted to make that clear. So I'm for it. That's, I definitely support it.
I do applaud the board for beginning with your why and remembering why you started down this road. No, pun intended, but it's very important to revisit your why and then you move to your how. So thank you for doing that. I think that's very important. It links back to your goals. And you were very articulate with your goals this year as in prior years, but you really had honed in on those goals. So thank you for beginning with your why.
And Dr. O'Connell actually stole my line.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Iris.
My response was merely going to be, I think we created a SMART goal in terms of the SMART goal. And I think we have kind of completed that goal, which was to learn more about the electrification, a portion of it. The sustainability was a broad goal, but electrification was a part of that goal. And I think we have been able to gather information. So I did not think it was a question whether or not we were in favor of moving forward with electrification of the bus fleet. So the goal was meant to support that philosophy. And so my answer is yes, I am ready to move forward to our next step.
Great. All right, and that just leaves me. And as with the rest of the board, I am in agreement. We've gotten a lot of information, and I think going through all of that has made me feel a lot more comfortable. Last year and when we were working on our sustainability goal, it was the transition to electrification was something that I thought was important for the district. And what we've learned since then has reinforced that. And for me, it's just making sure that we do it in a way that is smart and is sustainable and, is done in a responsible manner so that we can roll it out and it is successful and, is a long-term contributor to bringing down our carbon emissions in the community and providing that education and sustainability for our students. So I'm all for the moving forward as well. So thank you all for going through all of that. I know for some it was probably like, yep, we were there already. But yeah, so, from there, I think our next step really is to begin to talk about what some of these possibilities could be. And I know, to Neil's point, his second question was sort of that, if we've said yes to one, is question number two that we would be discontinuing the purchase or the purchase of fossil fuel vehicles going forward. And I think that is something that we need to consider with respect to the fact that you know, to Neil's point, our first responsibility is to make sure that we get our students, you know, that we are transporting our students where they need to go. So I know Neil had some thoughts on that. What are other people's thoughts?
Is
on
this,
that?
you're talking about, are we going to promise to forgo all gas and diesel engines going forward? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean by
Correct.
that?
So,
Right,
so
basically,
would we not have a proposition that has that with gas vehicles in the coming budget season, understanding that we do have that we have transportation needs that we need to make sure we're
Yeah.
meeting.
Sarah, can you just
I
state
view
what
it as,
those are? Can you just state so that
Yes.
anyone
So
watching
actually,
knows what those are?
and Rochelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but after further review of our our fleet replacement schedule, we've determined that what we need for next year is 2 24-passenger minibuses, or I'm sorry, 30-passenger minibuses. Sorry, I'll let Rochelle jump in there.
130, 120.
I'm sorry, 130 and 120. So we need 2 small vehicles, and we are not going, we've determined that we do not need to replace a 66-passenger big bus for next year.
Well, we have not replaced any 66-passenger buses in 2 budget cycles. You need to be aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in anticipation of this, last year you replaced 1. Okay, so now you're still down 2, and you're not putting any in this budget, unless you're going for an electric big bus. So it's going to catch up with you. You need to think about that.
right. And so that's the reason why I wanted to have that discussion at this point, because if in fact the couple of things that are in the information that we've gotten through the Bus Electrification Task Force and what my reading indicates. And the first is that there is a longer lead time for the acquisition and delivery of an electric vehicle.
Correct.
Okay, and I know that when we spoke at our last meeting, I think it was Denise, or perhaps it was even people from Bluebird, said it's 12 to 14 months.
That might be for a big bus. For a mini bus, it's
for a big bus. I'm talking about a big bus now, and because we'll then get to the other one. So, if in fact we determine that we are never going to buy another fossil fuel bus, and we have a need for a large 66-passenger bus because one is taken out of service, fails inspection, etc., we're going to have a backup plan. And that's, you know, and that does not necessarily and probably does not mean delivery of an electric vehicle. It means having some kind of a lease, borrow, buy an old one from somebody, you know, as we used to do from HUD, or something to meet that need. So that is a point to consider. But Rochelle, from what Rochelle has said, we do not see a burning need. Maybe a warm need, but not a burning need to add a bus, a 66-passenger now.
I think, but I don't think that you should put it off. If you're going to consider the electrification, you should put that in the package. Because
my understanding,
12 months to get it.
I understand. I'm not saying don't put that in the package, but what I'm saying is that if we were in a situation where one of them died tomorrow, we'd have to fill that need before we could get that delivery. That's point number one. And with the smaller buses, there may be the same time frame for delivery, 8, 10, 12 months, so that if we basically only went for electric buses, we might not be able to replace the 30 passenger and the 20 passenger by September, and we'd have to fill that gap somehow. That's what I need to understand from Rochelle.
I was just going to say, Neil, but we did discuss at our last meeting, one of the things we talked about was the fact that it's a couple companies, both Highland and Bluebird, so that they would lease us a bus if we ran into trouble. If, you know, so there is a backup. We do have a plan B. We don't really have to worry about purchasing another vehicle.
I understand that, but
right.
They're speaking, both Highland and Bluebird, from the perspective, particularly Highland, of if you sign up for a lease, you know, we'll work with you. But obviously, if we don't, they're not so willing to work. But that's fine. I just want to make sure we're covered with that.
Right. So we did talk about, and the other thing I'm unclear about, and it's one of the questions I would like to have answered, is I've been getting mixed information. From my understanding, we could get an electric bus in a more timely way from either Bluebird or another company. There's other companies other than Bluebird. So I'm wondering, I would like more information about that. Is that something, Denise, is it true? Is it possible to get another, to get an electric bus in a more timely way than 18 months or, 12 to 18 months?
Right.
Okay, so it is true. Okay.
So Andrea, we will, if we decide to move forward with this, we would make a determination, of course, what vendor we want to get our bus from. The state education department recommends a uniform fleet. Our vendor preference to keep our fleet uniform, and our vendor has made a commitment to work with us through this, move things along as quickly as possible. Okay, so that would be Bluebird. So you can't hang on that we won't have it by September. And this is also too big a decision to base this on. Your fleet, if you have to wait it out, like maybe say till next spring to get the electric buses, your fleet will last until then. Your fleet is in good enough shape to make it to that. It's too big of a decision to just say, oh, well, they can't have it here for September. Let's go with somebody else. First of all, Croton Harmon buys off the state bid. We get the best price. There's no haggling. There's nothing. We have an established rapport there. So we should stick with what's going to give us the best bang for our buck and work with our vendor who's going to work with us right through this process. And they've given us a commitment that if we want to go forward with this, they're going to do anything and everything they can to support us, to move things along, to get us the buses that we want as soon as possible.
So that would mean that my concern of if something goes down and we needed a rental for a period of time, Bluebird can work with us.
They've already given us that commitment that they will work with us.
Rochelle, I'm sorry. I just need a little clarification. I'm asking you as the transportation director, what are our needs? Because I hear the 2 smaller buses, and then I hear the discussion about the 66 passenger bus and that we haven't replaced one. I'm not going to base my decision on whether or not we have electric, and I'm not buying the diesel ever again. I want to know what my district needs, and that's what I want to base my decision on. So can you tell me, but electric aside, what do we need to make sure we have our students safely transported to school for the next year, for the budget cycle we're talking about?
Okay. Ideally, you should replace a big bus and the 2 vans. But the decision is, it also goes back to what are you going to do? Are you going to do electric or are you going to do the other? Which way are you going to go with that? Okay. The consideration is when you bring the electric in, as you go electric, you need to think about your buses are not going to be exactly the same as what they've been either. You have to watch how they're being built, what they're going to be capable of. You know, I talked about the underloader thing. They're not going to be exactly the same. You're not going to be able to send that bus out for the ski team or for this or for that. But it's good to start with one. If we have to replace a big bus, which we should because we didn't for 2 years, and I've got one that I would have gotten rid of this year, I can make it last until we get the next big bus because I anticipated that it was going to be electric. But don't put it off. You need a big bus, preferably electric if that's the way you want to go, and get the 2 vans. And stick with Bluebird. I have, you know, only because we have a good relationship, they make a good product that they stand behind. I'm not going to change in the middle of all of this. The dealers in Elmsford, they're going to walk us through this. It's to their benefit too, to work with us.
And when you say the 2 vans, you're talking about the 20 and the 30 or something
20
different?
and a 30.
Okay, thank you.
Or it could go at 24, 27. But yeah, that's what you need.
Thank you.
And those are the class 4,
Yes.
is that right? Okay.
Yes. So they'll qualify for those grants also.
Okay.
All
And
right, so
one
that's
of them may possibly qualify for additional money too. But we won't know that until we go through the grant process.
right. So you've just said, I think, what I understood you to say before, which is get the 2 vans for sure. We really do need a bus, but not September 1 necessarily. If it's not available, it can wait a little bit. And that was my understanding as well.
But it should be in this budget cycle, right? We
Yes.
should be working on the
Yeah.
proposition for this budget cycle.
Yeah, we're not kicking it to next year. We're just saying we do want it this year when they can get us a bus.
Well, what you have to do is you have to give them a purchase order for those buses in order for them to start building.
Correct.
Right.
Because these are very expensive. So they have a process they have to go through also.
Sure. Yeah, we're just assessing what the need is with your expertise. What is our need, and we now know.
Right.
So that's valuable.
Can I just have a clarification? So what we're talking about is we can hang in there. So we would put it in this budget cycle, but let's say the electric bus was ready in November, we could start in November. It's not that the actual, when we get the bus isn't dependent upon the budget cycle. It's just when that budget cycle is, that's where we get our money from. So you keep saying it's September.
But you, in your proposition, you also have 2 gas-powered vans. So you have to make a determination. Do you want, and I would never vote and say that you're never going to buy another fossil-fueled vehicle again, because you don't know what the future holds.
Right, and that's not part of the proposal that I'm aware of. So
that was just something that Neil kind of brought up for discussion, but we've never really said that as a board before.
And I'm fairly certain we wouldn't vote to promise never to do something.
And we can't bind other boards.
Right.
We cannot bind another board. So
future board, right.
Well, and then in terms of this budget cycle, as Rochelle mentioned, I think one of the, what we've discussed was that, we would have a proposition that does include 2 the gas vehicles for those smaller vehicles, the 20 and the 30. Because we're also have propositions on those same 20 and 30 electric vehicles, right? Those propositions are contingent on our grant funding, on making sure, on sort of getting all of those things lined up. Because if something doesn't fall through there, then that proposition is, we can't work with it. We can't bond for something. And then we would really be in a bind. So I think that's sort of our first off, right? So a proposition that does include those 2 gas vehicles.
I don't understand that. Can you explain that? Why? Because I saw the one that said that the two small vehicles would be electric vehicles, but why would they be gas vehicles?
So, right. So I'm sorry, Rochelle, I don't want to hop over you.
If you don't get the funding, Andrea, you're still going to have to replace the vehicles.
So what we're saying is that we're aiming towards electric vehicles, but if we can't get there, then we would, yes, yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
basically,
so-
the community would be voting, do we agree that we need these two vans? And that has to be a yes. And then the next proposition is, okay, which one do you want? You know, like the first yes says, well, these are gas vans. The second yes says, we're actually going to bump it up to an electric.
But the other thing about that, and I think the way it's structured, and this may be confusing to the public, but what we're trying to do is say, if you say yes on one, that is a gas vehicle, and then you say yes on each of the electric vehicles, we don't have to buy the gas vehicle. You have given us authorization to permit us to buy it, but if we go and find that we've got the funding and we can get it the electric vehicles in the time frame, we just don't use the authorization that the public has given us to buy a gas vehicle, and it just sits there and either expires after 5 years, or we maybe, another board uses it at another point. But we have that option. If we do not include that first proposition, buy two gas vehicles, and the voters, we just put propositions for electric vehicles and the voters vote it down, or we can't do it with the subsidies, then we have no authority to buy anything. Then we're in a bind, which, as Rochelle has talked about, is a serious bind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that I'm wondering about in that regard is if we were to just have, and this is really getting to point 3, not point 2 of my analysis, but it's okay. If we were to just have a resolution to purchase a 30-passenger van with the voters authorizing up to X dollars, which would be inclusive of any grants, should it be electric, or any, and these other structures, and we're not able to do that, could we use such a resolution to then purchase a gas vehicle? Or must we specify in a resolution, and it's a legal question, and Denise may know about, be able to answer this, whether we have to say gas vehicle is option A and electric vehicle is option B, and we need option A, but we can't just have, we can't just have a general proposition.
Denise, you're on mute.
Yeah.
I think it's imperative that there's transparency in the resolution. So we need to specify.
Okay. So if we are going to be specifying, then the way we can do it one of two ways. One, we can have alternate propositions, none of which are contingent on the gas vehicle, or we can say it is contingent on the gas vehicle because we know we can get that delivered by September if we need it, and we know that the alternative of an electric 30-passenger van or 20-passenger van would be our preferable option if we can do it in a timely manner. But we have to do it that way, I understand, if I understand you correctly, to be transparent to the public that we are going to buy a gas vehicle if we have no alternative.
So can I just ask a question though, because this is one thing I don't understand. Well, I shouldn't say I don't understand it, but it's not clear to me, is what is the likelihood? Because you're saying we could get these two electric vans if the funding comes through. So I would just like to hear about, from administration, where's the funding coming from? What's the likelihood of us getting that funding? I just, are we just covering our, is this just to cover us, or because we most likely will be getting the funding, or is that really up in the air? That's what, and how could we find out what the likelihood is?
So you want to start and then I can conclude, Rochelle?
No, go ahead.
So no one to date has received the funding, so we really don't have that information. I will tell you that because of our size and our mileage, we are very close to not meeting the requirements, but we're also close to meeting them. So there are requirements as far as scrappage, which we believe that we meet those requirements, at least for the 66 passenger bus. We have a vehicle within the age range that we can use for scrappage. The mileage requirements, we've been told from individuals who are familiar and in conversation with NYSERDA, and they have expressed that there is a potential to have those mileage requirements waived. There is also, with regard to the smaller vehicles, there is the possibility of both the grant for disadvantaged communities, which would increase that amount by $10,000, because we travel to one of our districts, we travel through a disadvantaged community, we would be eligible for additional funding. So for the 27 passenger vehicle, which is a class 4 weight, there is a potential for $100,000 NYSERDA grant. The $100 is a $90,000 grant plus the additional $10,000 for the disadvantaged community. With regard to the 66 passenger bus, the potential there for the QMAC grant is $200,000. Again, no one to date has received this funding. We are not a shoo-in by any stretch. We have, we have some limitations because of the mileage. Generally, with these grants, they want to reduce the most carbon possible in order to, to get the most out of the grant. Because we travel so few miles, it could be an issue for us. However, we have a very strong community and advocacy group within Croton through Croton 100, Mothers Out Front, and they have been in conversation with NYSERDA and have assured us that they are doing everything that they can to support us with grant funding. So that's a long answer, but.
But essentially, that's why the propositions would be contingent on making sure that funding is in place. That's why it includes that.
I just would like to know is I've been told, by these groups that we could find out really quickly, like in a matter of weeks, whether we would get the funding or not.
I have not. There is another district, 2 other districts who applied years ago, and they have not yet received any grants.
I think the bottom line of it is, if you don't have the money in hand, you don't have the scholarship, you can't really rely on it.
I hear you, Neil, but what I've been hearing is that if we did an RFP, if we went, if we filed that we would be hearing back really quickly. So I'm just wondering if that's actually the case. And also, having had conversation with, I know Iris wants to chime in, not to speak for you, but she brought something up when we were having a conversation that I thought is very important. Iris,
if I could just respond to that, Andrea. So the RFP has nothing to do with the NYSERDA funding.
Nope.
That
I might be using the wrong technology, it's like the wrong word, but how do we apply for that funding?
So,
I heard that
So-
if, as long as we put in whatever it was necessary, that
Purchase
a very
order.
short paper, purchase order, that we could hear in a matter of weeks.
Okay, wait, okay? It's a very complicated process that your vendor will walk you through, because you can't go through the process unless you have your vendor. And your vendor has a big responsibility in this, because they're the ones that will submit the voucher for that $200,000. So
and just let me interrupt, and that's why it also serves us to go through the state contract rather
exactly.
than the arduous process of expediting an RFP.
And your vendor is providing you with a grant writer to walk you through this process. NYSERDA has made this very, very difficult. People much brighter than us are taking this whole thing apart, and it depends upon who's asking what day, who gets a different answer. So don't believe everything you've heard, because there are people more experienced than us who have gone through this process, have been accepted, and still do not have that money in hand. And at the last minute, we're told, oh, yes, you're getting the money, but no, you can't submit this bus. We've disqualified that. You need to give us another bus.
Well, thank you for the
there's a lot of
clarification.
steps.
So Iris, you
before
wanted to
go,
say something?
Neil, I just want to say, one of the things I had a chance to do is I did a little bit of research, and with the disadvantaged community grant, I'm extremely uncomfortable with pushing for it, because that grant is meant for disadvantaged communities who had suffered extremely at the hands of the Volkswagen, causing the Volkswagen settlement. If our community isn't an affluent community that's not technically in that, I don't think we should be grabbing $10,000 out of that fund to supplement ourselves. Making disadvantaged communities carry the burden even more. We drive through it. From my understanding, we have one bus that goes through there currently because we have one child. I feel it's a philosophical thing with me. I don't like taking from communities that are in need if I don't fit the criteria. So that's my objection to.
Okay.
And it's $10,000. I object to taking that. The question though I do have is, my understanding is that we can do a partial payment where we would pay and then the company agrees to take, we pay what comes out of our bond, and then the company waits to get payment from the voucher. And if it never comes through, I guess they don't take the payment, they don't get paid. I don't know, that part wasn't explained, but can you touch upon whether or not that's accurate? We don't have to pay. Do we have to pay everything up front?
From NYSERDA, you're not getting the bus. They're not going to give you the bus and wait for the rest of the money, because NYSERDA is providing the bigger amount of that money. NYSERDA is supplying the $200,000. You're only, say on a big bus, you're only supplying $158,000.
That's just referring to how the transaction is transacted, for lack of a better term. So that's just saying that the grant is provided and the vendor is getting that 200. It's not a pass through, and then we would pay our portion. So
another way to look at this is, we buy, and we'll take the big bus. We have $186,000 or whatever that number is to pay the vendor, and the vendor has a coupon that the vendor got from somebody worth $200,000. And so what the vendor is saying is, I got the $186,000 from us, and I got the coupon, which they have redeemed. They've got the money in the bank account, and I can, in essence, draw upon that when I send the bus to Croton. And so they're not, as Rochelle says, they're not going to give us anything unless they have the guarantee of that $200,000 in their hands, so to speak. That's, Rochelle, what you're saying, and what Denise is saying, right?
Correct.
So we need to know before we purchase. We actually write the purchase order and, we
So
submit it.
we-
Well, we
you
write the
write
purchase order, but before we actually get the bus, we
Brian?
need to know that they've given us, that the state has given the money. And I just want to say one other thing. I agree totally with what Ira said about that 10,000.
And that's at our discretion. That was just recommended by Croton 100 as an additional, cost saving measure. But we have the discretion not to apply for those funds.
Okay.
Right?
We are spending an awful lot of time now. It's 8:25. We've been an hour. We're talking a lot about what could go wrong here. However, everything's contingent. So if everything goes wrong, then we buy gas buses. I don't know why we have to dwell on this, to be honest. It's so exhausting.
Well,
the only thing, Brian, that I want a clarification on is what's the likelihood? Because not really being in the trenches, people have been doing a lot more research than I have. I wanted to get a feeling, is just for transparency purpose, when we go out, is this a 50-50 chance? Is it likely? We need to have always, as a school district, to be able to cover ourselves.
Well,
Which is, I think, what the first proposition does.
I think we're covered, right? We are going out and saying, we do not know if we're going to get this money. We don't even know if we're eligible. We don't know if they're going to pay us. However, if they do, then we'll buy electric buses. If we do not get the money, we will not, right? So the likelihood, it's 0 to 100. I have no idea, because apparently nobody's gotten any money. So and if that's the case, if NYSERDA is just a total fraud and they don't give us the money, then we're not getting any electric buses this year. So that's really what my point. Like, we can keep saying what if, but if we do not put this on the proposition, nobody can vote on it and nothing can ever happen.
Just to clarify, we know NYSERDA is not a fraud, but
I'm not
bureaucratic in terms of taking some time to get just felt I needed to get it out there. But
Right.
To Brian's point, I
Thank
think,
you for
we
saying
do
that.
have a few, right? There are some, in terms of now moving on to sort of the concretes of what are some possible propositions, right? I think there is the first proposition that would provide for the purchase of 2 small gas vehicles, right? We are not proposing a proposition that would include a gas or a diesel big vehicle. We recognize that we will need to replace a larger bus. And I think that is something that we should look at as far as the electric propositions. But in terms of a proposition, so that we know we've met, to Neil's point, that first need of getting our students transported where they need to go when school starts in September. We have that first proposition, which is for a 20 passenger and a 30 passenger bus. Is everyone in agreement on that?
I am.
Are you asking if we should not put a diesel 66 passenger bus on this as a proposition?
We are not. Yeah, that is not the plan. The plan is to do the 20 and the 30 gas on the proposition.
And then, but according to transportation, we probably need that. Yeah.
We do.
To Rochelle's point, we need it, but we don't need it for September. Thus, we might be better off if we, as we said at the beginning, we're committed to moving in the direction of electrification. And that is a large grant amount that isn't going to be around forever. I think we might be better off putting
I see what you
putting
mean.
forth
Okay.
the proposition for an electric big bus versus
what
a diesel big bus.
I think I understand. So the four whatever they are, the class 4 bus is mandatory. The 66 bus 6 passenger, we are only proposing electric, because we are confident that it's going to be available within the coming school year.
Correct.
And it
Right.
has
And we don't need it in
grant funding.
September.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Then I agree with that.
Okay.
And just to ask quickly, because the reason why we do this is to sort of keep our expenses on like a plane. So it does seem to make sense from a financial perspective to do it that way too. Am I correct? Okay. I'm definitely.
Iris, do you have a question?
I'm just curious, there's like 3 propositions here though, if it's only one bus.
So Iris,
the-
what I tried to do is to provide as much information as I possibly could so that the board could make a decision about how rapidly they want to move forward with this. So what I provided was the cost of the 66 passenger vehicle and the potential to have the 27 and the 24 passenger vehicle in the electric model. Now, as you can see, the funding is considerably less for those vehicles, and the purchase price is considerably more compared to the gas-powered vehicles. So the option is to bundle them all together and have them as a contingent proposition, to take one of them, for example, the 66 passenger bus, and make that as a contingent proposition, or to separate all 3 of them and have them all as contingent propositions. So it's just a matter of how much the board is, how fast you want to go, how much risk you want to take, how much you want to put on the ballot for the community to consider. It is a lot of propositions. But I did want to put it all out there so that the board could make the best decision.
It was just to provide you with options.
Right.
That's
What
what that is.
Denise, correct me if I'm wrong. Part of the reason in terms of the considering splitting them out is because they all have grant funding attached to them. That if we combined it all and say one of those didn't end up qualifying for the grant funding, the whole proposition, then you can't bond for it at all, right? That would sort of wipe out the entire proposition. If you have them as individual, then if something doesn't work out with one of them, the other 2, and everything works fine with the other 2, then you're good, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate and understand that it does add, a lot of propositions onto the ballot, which will require much more extensive voter education, but I think I think that's one of those things where to weigh the benefits of that.
Yeah, it was to put safety nets in place so that one thing going down didn't abolish the others.
Mm-hmm. Brian?
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, I might change my answer. If we need a 66 passenger bus and we don't know that we can guarantee a grant, then despite the fact that an electric bus may be available, it may be unaffordable. Am I right? So we have the same problem in all 3 cases. If we do not get funding, then it's a very expensive thing. And I don't know I'm not sure we shouldn't have a diesel 66 passenger there that says, okay, we all agree we need a big bus at some point this year. However, if we get funding, we would rather have an electric bus. I actually think that all 3 vehicles probably need the same thing, because Rochelle says that we need that bus sometime before next September, meaning 22. And if we just say, well, we're going to put on there an electric 66 passenger contingent upon funding, and we don't get funding, then we also don't get a bus.
Right.
At
That's
all.
correct.
No bus.
That is
And I'm not
correct,
sure-
Brian.
And it sounds like we need that bus.
We do need that bus within the year.
Yes.
So really what you're talking about is packaging, if you will, and then explanation, because I was looking at that and saying, why would the 66 passenger class 7 bus be contingent on Proposition A, on the gas? Because they're really not connected, as Brian rightly points out. So really what we probably would want to say is.
No, but Neil, just
Yep.
to that point, if we have them as separate, non-contingent propositions, that we could have everyone vote on the electric bus and not have the two gas-powered smaller.
No. I understand that. But what I'm saying is probably the best way to do it, based on Brian's very good point, is to say, Proposition A, gas-powered Class 4 vehicle. Proposition B, Class 4 vehicle electric contingent on Proposition A. Proposition C, gas 27 or 30 or 24 passenger Class 4 vehicle contingent on A. Proposition D, a gas-powered 66 passenger bus. To deal with Rochelle's point or Debbie's point, we're going to need it in the next year. Proposition E, contingent on passage of Proposition D, would be an electric 66 passenger bus, because you don't have to actually execute on the propositions, right? You have 5 years, I think you said to us before, to actually do something if a resolution is passed. So if we add a gas-powered 66 passenger bus and then link that to the electric 66 passenger bus, when we're saying we've got, the smaller buses, gas, or preferably electric if we get our funding, get our grants. 66 passenger bus, gas, but preferably electric. And you've set it up in parallel. Denise, you understand what I mean?
I do.
And everybody else?
I do. However, I have some concerns about the communication and community education around that. I feel that, Andrea had asked about what is the percentage. I feel that the electric bus is a risk willing to take. We could always go out if we were short the vehicle and we didn't get the funding. We could always go back out to the community for a bond proposition later in, on an off time during the school year if we didn't get the funding. I feel if we're eligible for anything, that is the vehicle that we're most likely eligible for. So that's a lot of, I was confused while you were talking. That's a lot for the community.
Yeah, I agree with Denise on this. I think that we need to go, the way we get this passed and the way we get it done is we have to go for it, right? For every additional proposition, the more complicated it gets and the more likely you are to get people who vote for the trustees and then just skip voting. Yeah, they don't vote yes or no on the propositions because they get confused by it.
Brian?
One question though. I'm
Brian
sorry.
was next.
Yeah, Brian, you go.
So Prop A right now has 2 vehicles in it. Can't we just put the third vehicle in there and say the district needs 3 vehicles? Community, this is how it's going to work. You have to vote that we're going to need 3 vehicles. Prop B, C, D are what they are, and they are basically upgrades to vehicle 1, 2, 3 in the first proposition. So instead of 6, that makes it 4. And so that's not entirely confusing and not understandable to most people. And we do have partners out there who are they are just gearing up to promote this thing.
There are people
and explain it to everybody and say, you have to vote on this and you must vote yes on blah, blah, blah. So I think it could be very much like what the proposal, that I see on the email, but the third vehicle, the 66 passenger, is in Prop A.
So
right?
Bundle the 3 vehicles that are gas vehicles in the first one, and then separate out the 3 in terms of 3 separate. So it'd be total
electric
4.
contingent.
Right, and those are already separate. Yeah,
Right.
those three are already separated. I think Neil's confusion, it was also mine. I think the bus was in Prop A initially, which is why they may all say
Yeah.
contingent on Prop A. And so, yeah, I think that that's pretty clear. And basically, you know, you can number them or do whatever you want to do to say vehicle 1 is a 20-passenger van. Vehicle 2 is a 30-passenger van. Vehicle 3 is a 66. And then Prop B has to do with vehicle 1. Prop C has to do with vehicle 2. Prop D has to do with vehicle 3. Right?
All
So now we've
contingent
gotten,
on one.
yeah, we've
Right.
gotten approval from the community that says we know we need buses. We must get our kids to school. And if approved by the community, we also know that if we then get funding, we're going to get electric buses.
Iris,
I'm
do you have
confused.
questions?
I'm confused. I'm confused.
So
We
I
have
think
to-
what Brian is proposing is a change from what I had sent you before of Proposition A, in which you would have two vehicles, vehicle 1 being a 20-passenger van and vehicle 2 being a 30-passenger van, making that a proposition that includes 3 vehicles, a 20-passenger van, a 30-passenger van, and a 66-passenger bus.
The only concern that I have is that the bus will not get passed.
That A will not get passed.
They're going to see the gas-powered bus and then the electric bus. And when the electric bus is really what we're going for, because that's going to get us the greatest funding, and it's going to serve our fleet best because we need that bus ideally. So my only concern is that people may say, you know, oh, we don't want the bus. We don't want a bus. We're just going to get the 2 smaller vehicles.
So I guess then bottom line, do we, in terms of the replacement, right? If the 66-passenger electric, either A, doesn't pass, or B, we don't get the contingent grant funding, can we make it until the 22-23 budget cycle to then bond for a 66-passenger bus? Or is that putting our fleet at risk?
I would imagine it's
Fleet
at
would be
risk,
at
but we have no
risk.
idea
Okay.
what the risk is,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's a toss-up, just like getting the funding. We
We
don't know
always
what's
try
going
to
to happen.
manage risk, though. This is our way of trying to manage risk.
Yeah.
So Rochelle, what do you feel about that proposal to put all 3 in Prop A and then have Prop B, the electric bus, Prop C, the electric van, and Prop D, the electric van?
Oh,
The first thing that you're going to be asked, though, is it diesel or is it gas? So last year I was getting 2 diesels. I had to drop a diesel. I had to change my bus to a gas. What they're going to ask you, is it a 66-passenger gas or is it a 66-passenger diesel?
Well, we have all diesel now, right?
We have 1 gas that we were forced to get last year.
Oh, we bought a gas one last year. Huh.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
prefer to get a diesel. If we're going to wind up with another big bus and we don't get electric, I'd rather get diesel, but I'll go either way.
I think it's a bit of a sell. You know, actually, diesel is a better engine
Yes, it
in
is.
general.
Yes.
And I think that people are just misinformed about what diesel actually is. So I think that may be a bit of a marketing problem. People think that gas is somehow better, but it isn't. But I think from a conceptual standpoint, I think we have to make sure that the community agrees that we need 3 new vehicles. At some point in the year, we need 3 new vehicles, 2 of them immediately and 1 later. And you know what? Honestly, if the bus fleet looks fantastic in February or March, well, we don't actually have to buy another bus until next year, you know. But we won't know that until March. So
Can I ask a quick
there's that possibility too.
clarifying question for Denise with regard to that? If all 3 of those vehicles are included on that 1 bond proposition, and we then realize in February that we don't need to buy that diesel, but the big bus, do we just don't use that purchase order and we don't use that portion of the bond? Or because we will have already had to bond for that full amount, correct? Or we don't bond for it until we actually purchase them.
We bond in October.
Right.
We bond in October.
Okay, so that was, I just.
Well, so we understand that if we bond in October for all three buses, the full amount that we're talking about, 220,000, and we end up not using the money for the diesel bus, what happens?
Well, you'd be using it for the if you weren't getting the diesel, wouldn't you be getting the electric?
Well, no. What we're saying is, okay, so, but Denise has said, we've already borrowed the money. You've gone to the bank, we've taken out $220,000. We're only spending 113 on the two small vans, and we're keeping the other one in an account until we need it. And we decide we don't need it. Okay, we've already borrowed it because we bond in October, but we don't need that money. We don't have to spend it. What happens to that money?
Honestly, Neil, I don't think that we would bond for the full amount. We would bond for what we expect to expend.
Okay, so that would mean then, and this, because you said we bond in October, that would mean if it came to be January and we said, oh, we need to buy that diesel bus and we're not getting the electric, so we need to spend that other $110,000, whatever number that is, for the diesel 66 passenger bus, we would bond anticipation note in January of 2022 for the money we need to buy the diesel 66 passenger bus. Am I right on that?
Yes, but so let's just say we have the first proposition, 2 and 1, all gas powered or diesel powered. Then we have, let's say proposition 2 is passed for the electric vehicle, electric bus. I believe we would have the authority within proposition A to spend up to, let's say, 250,000 for the 3 vehicles.
Right.
But we would not utilize that full authority. We would bond for, let's say, the 113, the two smaller vehicles. And then on proposition B, we would bond for the amount of the vehicle less the grant funding once we received approval for the grant.
You have a separate bond.
Right, a separate bond, but we could go in January if we realized the state is not coming through with the grant on the electric and we can't go to the end of the year. We need to get a bus. I had asked a question about borrowing, leasing, getting a bus from, short-term lease from Bluebird so that we don't have to worry about bonding something. Okay. And if in fact we can do that to deal with the situation that Brian had raised, we would be able to get something to fill out the fleet for the remainder of the year. But we couldn't buy anything. And so now, if that's where we're at, and then the question may be better not to include the 66 passenger bus in proposition A, as long as we know we can get a loaner, I'll call it that, if we need to during the year while we're either waiting for the state to come through and the bus to be built, or we realize that's never going to come to pass and we can deal with the rest of the year and we'll do something in spring of 22. So my question really is, talking about options and protecting ourselves, do we need to ask the voters to give us the authority we may not be using? Or do we have another source to get a vehicle if we need one during the year? And really, Rochelle, that's a question for you. You had said Bluebird will work with us. And if Bluebird will work with us and Bluebird will be able to loan us a bus or lease us a bus for 4 months, if we need it, that covers it better, I think, than saying to the voters, give us authority for a big bus and give us $250,000 Prop A for something that we might not use, but if we have to, we're going to use it. The other issue about that is if we do use it and buy that bus, we've got it for 12 years. Right? We have the 66 passenger class 7 bus that we don't really want to have, but we've got it for 12 years or whatever its useful life is, as opposed to being able to borrow while we pursue electrification or get a loaner. Yeah.
Can I jump in? I'm really afraid that our community, if anyone watches this, they're going to really get confused because at least I'm confused. I just succinctly, with these 4 propositions, right? There's 4 of them.
A, B, C, D.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah.
Right now, there's
Yep,
4. Yeah.
4.
Are we talking about, is there any scenario where we're getting 166 and 2 vans all electric?
Yes.
Yes. If everything is a yes and the funding comes through, then all 3 are electric.
And then what is the van financing cost for that? Because I don't get that from what's on this paper.
So.
Because it says A is the 113, that's a constant. And then you just add in for
No, it's
B.
not a constant. The number
A is
on
a
A
separate
goes
proposition.
away. If A is accepted and nothing else, then 113 is the number.
Right.
If A is accepted, everything else is also accepted, then the 113 is not included in the remainder of the numbers.
Right, but let's take, for example, Proposition D. The 286 buys you the 2 electric and the 1 bus?
No, it buys you
Prop D
one
is
electric vehicle, which is going to be a 24 or 24 passenger vehicle.
Right.
So where are we paying for the other 2 vehicles?
In
So
C or in and in
C
B.
and in
Those
B.
are all individual amounts.
So that's
It's
what
not like
I'm
a rolling total.
So I was thinking of, so we're talking about bonding 2, 4, 6, approximately $700,000 at one point. If we go with 3 electric.
750,000, correct.
And that's what I'm saying is not clear. And that's what can cause confusion. Because I thought I was wrong, but I think if we're saying, oh, we might bond up to $750,000 to get 3 electric vehicles, that's a different scenario than, oh, we might bond $263,000 for just 1 vehicle and 1 electric and 2 gas.
But it's 3 separate propositions. So if you.
No, I understand, Denise. What I'm saying is I was sitting here thinking we're talking about anywhere from 217 to 286, but we really aren't. We're talking about anywhere from 217 to 750,000. So there has to be a different financial calculation as a result of that for our budget if we were to bond 750 as opposed to bonding 250.
it's a big difference. I
Can you
mean,
speak
the
to that
reality
for
is
me?
that if Prop A is yes, then the minimum is 113. But yes, we could go all the way up to 750 from there.
And so my question is that what we're saying we want to do as a board? We want to go that high, or do we and present that to the community, or would it make more sense to clean this out and just say we want 1 electric bus and we want 2 minivans to start? That's our starting point. Or we want $500,000 to get maybe 2 electric vehicles and 1 non-electric. But I think hearing up to $750,000 to get 3 electric vehicles, that's with grant, scares me. And I understand the total cost of ownership and you get it paid back in other ways, But I would want to know, how does that, we're spending those dollars today. How does that impact my budget going forward?
And what is the, sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now, but what is the versus how much would the total be for all the fossil fuel vehicles?
The-
If we went with the diesel and 2 of the other vehicles, it would be about 251 as opposed to 767.
Mhm.
In other words, it's about another $135,000 to $140,000 for a 66 passenger vehicle.
And my only point is transparency, because that wasn't transparent to me. Transparent, the community needs to understand what they actually are voting to do.
Yep. And the question then comes, when you look at the total cost of ownership, right? And how much is saved, and like everything else, it's saved in the later years, right? The other question that comes to this is, all right, it's $750,000, but it's like a mortgage in that it is spread out over 15 years, okay, with a certain rate of interest.
5 years.
Okay, I said, sir, no, 5 years. So that would mean that we would be, let's say we're at a 2% interest rate. I'm guessing by the time bands come out, that would mean that in the next 5 years, we will be paying back whatever that amount is. So that's going to hit our debt in a certain manner, which is going to have other implications for our budget.
And
Back
so
to
what
my-
I'm
you're
thinking-
asking, what is that? What is that really? How does that really affect us?
Well, what I'm also thinking is, if the prices are going to go down, does it make sense to put such a big investment in now? Maybe go smaller now with,
Yeah.
a smaller price tag. I don't know.
Andrea, then Brian.
Okay. Yep.
I was just going to say, the thing is, though, is what Neil just pointed out is interest rates are really low, and it could, even if the price went down, it could end up costing us more down the road. And sorry, Brian, you can go.
If I could just jump in, though the prices of those vehicles are dropping quickly. So we could be paying for those vehicles at the height of the market. That's the other side.
Right. So the reason to do it sooner than later potentially is these grants go away at some point, and it's probably not long from now. So our prices on $250,000 vehicle really going to go down by a lot more than $100,000 anytime soon. Chances are very, very tiny that actually happens. So it is a chance, but it's highly unlikely. I mean, yeah. So I would say that the price being high minus the grant is that I don't think that we're going to come out behind just because prices may drop by 10 or 15% a year over the next couple of years, because there won't be grants for very long.
That is a good point, especially with the worry of the state funding.
Michelle? Oh, I thought you raised your hand.
I've studied the industry, I've talked to everybody, and the projection is that the prices are going to come down substantially because the government is going to subsidize this because they want to do it. And under the new administration, supposedly there's supposed to be a lot more grant money supposed to be coming towards this. So you may be spending your money now, and in a year you could save it. That's what the industry is predicting.
There's a lot on the table. There's a lot on the table, and also technology is advancing quickly. At least for the smaller vehicles, the technology is not even as advanced as the buses. Is that correct, Joe?
The changes are happening just since we started this. The changes are happening very, very rapidly. Very rapidly. it's a big decision to make because it's improving all the time. And you're going to pay a lot of money now, and next year could be a completely different story.
But that's risk with, you know, with
Yes,
any big move and
absolutely.
being a first responder.
Yeah. I had a question about the first proposition. Do we actually need to include, I mean, to my reading, the proposition A, there's nothing there that says gas in it or diesel in it. It's just, we're buying a van,
Right,
we're buying a bus.
right.
which costs in the total no more than
Which costs this.
$113.
And
$1,000.
and the further proposition, the further propositions are upgrade vehicle 1 to electric, upgrade vehicle 2 to electric, upgrade vehicle 3 to electric.
Or
and
get
plus
vehicle
the
3 as electric.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right.
we don't
That's what I mean by
necessarily-
upgrade.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to be clear on the upgrade thing because we don't necessarily want to say like, right, because all of those other things, the funding and everything needs to fall into place, right? We may be in a position where we need to purchase those gas vehicles.
Understood.
We may
Understood.
then, right, and we might be able to then add to with the electric vehicles. And if everything lines up perfectly, we might be able to get the electric vehicle, the 2 smaller electric vehicles instead of the gas vehicles.
Yeah.
But that is not a given, and I don't want anyone to look at it as a given. Like if A and C and D pass, right, then we just forget about A and we move for you know
Right.
the 2 electric vehicles, right?
I want to think
All
about
the
this.
stars align. That is the
Yeah,
way we
right,
would.
right.
I think
Un-
we would all love to
right.
do it.
I want to think about this from the point of view of how it gets done, right? And we have a very strong organization that is pushing very hard for electrification in our community. And the reason we are looking at doing these propositions this way is specifically because they have asked us to do it.
No, I mean,
They
I think
have-
the way we're
well,
looking. No, I think we're looking at doing it this way because
They've helped us
A,
quite a bit, but I don't think we would be discussing this if there had not been this big push in the community. I don't think we would be discussing this now. I think we'd be talking about it like a year and a half from now, not now. And we certainly wouldn't have been talking about it a year ago if we hadn't had the strong push.
but
And because just let me finish. And the reason I'm suggesting this, that I'm discussing that, is because, you know, fundamentally what we're doing here is, yes, you, the public, have told us that this is what you would like to do. We agree. Hence, we are putting forth these propositions. Now, ball's in your court. You said you wanted this. You have to vote for it.
Get people to vote for it.
Well, I would say, and this is the other issue, a segment of the public has advocated for this. And
Sure.
so it really, what says even more, to your point, Josh, is it then is up to the public, all of the public, to decide if this is
Yes.
important to them.
Exactly.
And if
That's
so,
exactly
with
right.
the understanding that,
Mhm.
as Iris pointed out, the costs are going to be a lot more. They may go down. You know, it may be like, you know, what is it? The cost of computer chips, microchips went down, you know, like 99% from, you know, but we don't know what's going to happen. And certainly if we are focused on electrification of the fleet over time, a year from now, and 2 years from now, and 3 years from now, there will be more buses that are going to need to be replaced because they've ended
Okay.
their useful cycle. And we will then have the advantage of those lower prices if they do in fact occur, as you know, as Rochelle has
Well,
pointed out.
We'll
You know,
also
it's
have
really,
the
do
advantage
you
of
wait?
this.
Do you wait until, you know? Do you wait until the sale comes down, or do you become a leader because you want to kind of, you know, make a statement and help the process along?
I
and are
think
you
we,
willing to spend that money?
right. I think we also need to go back to a recommendation from the Bus Electrification Task Force that had said, we'll examine ways to take advantage of the funding, grant funding that is available at this time. So whereas I appreciate community groups and their input, we convened a task force as per the board's goal. And that was one of the things they said to recommended to do. And that's what you're doing. You're examining ways to take advantage of grant opportunities that are before us. And which way you decide to do that, of course, is a board's decision. But I don't want to forget the work and good work of the Electrification Task Force.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So I think that, you know, we're sort of at the point where we know that we know what we want to do. We're sort of tinkering around the edges about wording of propositions, but I think we know what we want to do, and I think we have a sense that there's a significant segment of of our public that wants to do that. And I'm sort of the opinion that we ought to move. We have a proposition. We have a proposed set of propositions before us. Modulo a few adjustments, and I think it's time to move forward.
Right.
So just one final thing, you know, there is the question of the various types of chargers, and I understand that the next level below
Oh, thank you.
may not live forever, but apparently they're more in the range of the 10-ish thousand, and so if you know, to be leaders in this, it doesn't mean we have to get the best of everything always. So we can lead and get level 2 chargers, and we've saved ourselves in the neighborhood of $150,000 off of the top. And so that is a potential. You know, I don't know the technology, and I don't know enough about it, but from people that I think know, they said that the level 2 chargers are entirely adequate.
Well,
even if they are not ideal and they're not great for the buses 5 years from now.
So I did some research right before the meeting, and I got an article that was in School Transportation Review, I think it's called, in November 2020. And what it said, and Rochelle, I'll ask you if I'll ask you, Rochelle, if this is accurate or not accurate. It reads, technically speaking, electric school buses are charged by electric vehicle supply equipment, which either uses level 2 alternated current or direct current level 3. AC level 2 systems are less expensive than DC systems, but AC level 2 systems charge buses more slowly. Conversely, DC charging systems charge electric buses more quickly, but do cost more upfront. Standard SAE, you know, the standards say that those plugs can be used for both level 2 and level 3. Level 2 provides 30 to 80 amps of current with 19.2 kilowatt max. Most school buses can be partially charged in 4 to 6 hours and fully charged in 8 hours via AC power. For additional charging power, some electric school buses manufacturers fit their buses with 2 connections or 2 bidirectional chargers to decrease charging time. A DC fast charger, level 3, delivers high power directly into an electric vehicle battery system by converting AC power into direct current using an inverter, and it's up to 90 kilowatts and can charge a bus in 2 or 3 hours. And then it talks about Proterra and Thomas Built buses as providing options. So the question really is, to Brian's point, and it's my question as well, what the proposal is to use a level 3 direct current charging system at $65,000 per charger, as opposed to a $10,000 $15 or whatever it is level 2 charger?
Well, first of all, it's $65,000 once, not for each
Yeah.
vehicle.
Oh, no, I understand.
Okay.
It's once for each
So
charger.
one charger is going to work for 3 vehicles. You're going to go by the charger that the manufacturer of the vehicle recommends as best.
Okay.
You're also looking to invest in this because this is your future going forward. There's funding available for these chargers and the infrastructure now, so you're going to take advantage of that. So the recommendation is to go for the level 3 charger. It makes
Okay, now,
sense.
So
Brings-
then we could adjust these proposed amounts because you wouldn't need the 65 times 3. You just need the 65. And
However-
if the vendor comes back and says to us, you're fine with the level 2 charger for right now, then that would be you need a charger for each vehicle.
If you're going with
and that-
if you're going with the fast charger, you can share the charger. Okay?
Because of the charge time.
Mhm.
Right.
But
That was
the
my
issue
question,
is
yeah.
that
But then
if-
somebody's got to be there at 4 a.m., right?
Ah,
the
Brian,
issue is-
you know what?
I mean, on a snow day,
4 a.m.
okay, somebody's got to be
snow
there
day, Rochelle
at 10
lives there.
p.m. and then 1 a.m. and then 4 a.m. in order to
Michelle
change
is
the
usually
bus.
there.
Okay,
Plug.
right.
she's retiring, so
Okay, we'll work.
Yeah.
We'll work
She'll
it
still be
out,
there, right?
okay? These are things, that's why you get the people that know about this to advise us of this and how best to proceed with that, to also maintain the integrity of your vehicle. You're not going to cheap out at any point with this. Okay,
But the
No,
the
no,
point
and I
is-
wouldn't. I wouldn't want to buy something that Bluebird absolutely would not recommend,
right.
and that would perhaps void some kind of a battery warranty or
Thank
anything
you
like
very
that.
much.
However, if Bluebird says level 2 is perfectly fine, get 3 of them for $30,000. I think I'm going to go with that.
And then we just don't see I think part of the putting in the higher estimate into the bond propositions, right, is because the bond propositions are always written as a not to exceed amount. And so if what comes back and says we don't bond for it, then we don't have to spend that money, right?
So maybe we need to put in there we need to put in there $65,000 for chargers total, right?
well, but that's
yeah,
not, that's
on
not,
each
in-
proposition.
I'm sorry. Now I'm confused.
let me just say for that the way we are very limited with regard to the bond propositions. So if, let's say, we only put the charger with the bus, if the others were, and the bus went down, if the others were there separately without a charger, then, and they were voted in, they wouldn't have sufficient funds in
Okay.
the proposition.
So we need like 100 propositions.
Understood. So my question on this is, am I correct in understanding that even though all 3 propositions, B, C, and D, list a level 3 charger, $65,000, in reality, we're only going to buy one level 3 charger? Is that correct?
Is somebody at the bus depot all night long? And that's a serious question, because if it takes 3 hours to charge a bus, that means that every 3 hours somebody's got to go unplug a bus and move it. And I don't want to add work to people's day. So that's why if level 2 works fine and Bluebird is perfectly happy with that as far as their buses and not breaking them, then we might as well just get 3 chargers and then plug them in at 4 and be done.
I have a clarifying question.
wait.
I'm sorry.
Andrea, ask your question and
I just want to
let's
quickly
let
ask a
Michelle.
question, because at one point we were talking about funding this through our capital reserve and that we could get building aid. You know, what, or is this the best way to
That's
finance
still
it?
there, although we don't necessarily know if we're getting building aid. That's why I don't think it can be in the proposition.
Yeah, so
Okay,
so-
this would be done through a transportation bond anticipation note, similar to our other
The
replacement models.
infrastructure should be done this way.
Mhm.
And then also,
No.
the question came up about how this debt would affect the district? I know sometimes with the tax cap, our debt rolling on and rolling off makes a difference. I was just wondering if you could give us some sense of how it looks in terms of the timing of it.
Well, we would have to factor it in depending upon how much we were talking. I mean, this would be an additional debt of 700,000. And that would have to be factored in. We have some flexibility in our debt schedule when this would roll on. So this would roll on in 22-23, this debt. And we have some flexibility in there. But this would come, and the debt would be financed through our general fund. I just want to make that very clear, that the cost of the debt is financed through our general fund budget.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So the question that Brian had asked, and Rochelle, you perhaps can fill us in on this, is it would be great if you had one charger that 3 buses could attach to, and when one bus was done, right, it turned off and bus 2 started charging. Nobody had to be there to make the change, to pull out the wire and put it in the next, into the next bus. Is that technology does not exist, am I right?
I don't know, I'm not an expert on it.
Okay, but so if not, then we would have to do, we really would need 3 chargers, whether they are level 2 or level 3, because we got to have all the buses charged, and we're not going to have somebody come in at 1 o'clock in the morning, Sunday night through Thursday night to charge up a bus.
But there are other ways to do that, okay? You got to remember,
Sure.
All of your buses are not out all of the time, all day, all night. That's up to the supervisor to educate themselves, and the dealer will teach you that, how to manage your charging. That's part of the experience with this electric bus thing.
And Rochelle, wasn't that for the purpose of recharging a bus midday? So you have a morning run and you have an afternoon run.
Right.
When the temperatures get colder and you have to have heat on in the bus, the batteries drain significantly. So a fast charger would allow a midday recharge for that vehicle, as opposed to having to go the full, 6 hours or so.
Got it.
Brian?
And we're also talking about 2 smaller buses and 1 large bus. So I guess those vans don't need the full whatever you said, Neil, I forget, 4 hours. And so, maybe that's adequate, and I'm not against it. I'm just thinking like, as far as what this looks like, so we're not really talking about $750,000, because we literally are only going to buy 1 charger at this point, and so that's minus 130. So maybe we're talking about $620,000, where all gas is about 250. So it's still a big difference, but it's not nearly the difference that it sounded like.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and very quickly, I mean, and this is not in the proposition or anything, but very quickly the payoff starts to happen. In the lower fuel costs and lower operating cost and the lower maintenance cost and the selling back of electricity in some number of years. I don't know when that's going to happen. So it literally is, yes, it's a fair amount up front, but it's not all up front because we're borrowing it and you're paying for it over 5 years. And then the payback, though, it comes relatively quickly.
2 other things.
Josh,
that I know.
I'm sorry, Josh has his hand raised, and then I'll take your question, Neil. And then I do want to segue into a quick conversation. Well, not a quick, but I do want to remind us all that we're also on the table is a leasing proposition. And is that something that we want to consider? So
And the other
be
thing,
thinking about that while Josh goes, and then Neil.
I think it may actually be not 65,000, not 130,000. I think it's actually 150,000 less. And the reason is because I'm pretty sure that infrastructure cost is also that's the infrastructure for the charger, right?
yes.
So that means that it's actually $150,000 less.
Right, I agree.
Okay,
Okay.
No,
Um,
because the infrastructure for the chargers could cost considerably more. We may have to trench for electric. We may have to go across the driveway. So the infrastructure cost could be considerably more than that 10,000.
Okay. But we've listed the infrastructure cost at 10,000. We're bonding for 10,000.
Correct, because we're considering potential grants for that. And
So
looking
suppose
at
B
it-
let me play a scenario. Suppose B passes and C and D fail.
Okay,
Now we need to buy a charger for $65,000, up to $65,000, and we don't have the money to pay for the infrastructure
Right.
because it may cost more than 10,000.
well, most likely to have one fast charger in one station, we probably could. If we had to have more than one, depending upon where it's located, we looked at looked at two options as far as where it would be positioned in the bus depot, and that will change. I mean, that will be decided based on how many vehicles, because we looked at one vehicle, we looked at potentially two vehicles. If it goes to three vehicles, that would increase the cost.
Okay. Now the follow-up question is, what if? See, so it sounds like we're talking about a single level 3 charger, though. Even though we're going out for authorization for 3 level 3 chargers, right?
Because they're separate propositions.
Because they're separate propositions. Now, suppose all 3 pass. Now we've got authorization for 3 level 3 chargers. We don't actually have to buy 3 level 3 chargers. We could buy 1 level 3 charger and 1 level 2 charger. Save a little money. Then we have the fast charging option when we need it, and we have the slow charging option that we can put on a bus overnight. So it gives us a little more flexibility. Just something to think about.
That's why it's structured as not to exceed.
I understand. So, this is a place, I think we're bike shedding to an extent here, where we're building a nuke plant, but we're arguing over the color of the bike shed. I think that we've gotten down in the weeds a little bit too much. And, these are all things we're authorizing it. And it's important that we do. But there's going to be details that we work out after the proposition, right? The actual execution thereof, which, to a certain extent, we have to, we understand it's rapidly moving, and we're going to get authorization up to, and then we're going to use that as effectively as we can.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah.
but we do
Good.
need to be, I need to be clear on the proposition, because this is very legal language, and there are a lot of laws around this, and our bond counsel will need to craft this in time for us to vote on Thursday. So I do need some direction as far as what we would like to do. Are we going to bundle them? Are we going to do them independently? Are we going to do all of them? Are we going to do one of them?
okay. Josh's discussion answered a number of questions that I had. I will tell you that I think that the proposition A and B contingent on A, C contingent on A, D contingent on A, after our discussion, even though it's somewhat confusing and we'll need to explain why it's written that way, is something that I would support. I think as we've gone through this and we've talked about different permutations and combinations, there are a lot of different ways you could do it, but we want to do things that are transparent, but also not confusing, that are clear. There's one other thing I want to say, Josh, since we are talking, you said we're going a little bit into the weeds, but since we're trying to figure out a number, a not to exceed number, to tell Denise to go forward with bond counsel and for us to vote on a project, we have to go through this level of discussion to understand
Yes.
what
Mhm.
we're doing, because we don't want to say, oh, charge it 10,000, charge it 10,000, and that's not going to work. We can decide later on, we're only going to spend 10,000, but we need that done now. And I'm glad we've had that discussion.
Now,
So-
Neil, to your to your clarity that you've just shared, on Proposition A, though, was the 66, in your thinking, was the 66 passenger bus bundled in that?
I don't think I would. And I would say I would not bundle in because it makes that number larger. And if we are assured that we have the ability to lease a bus if we need to for the balance of the year until either the electric, or if electric can't be done till the next year's voters get that. As long as we can fill that gap, I'd prefer not to put it in there.
So your
Because-
A was the two, the
Correct.
20 and the 30. Got it.
Correct. And
Thank you.
the other reason is because if we do buy it, as I said, we've got it for 12 years.
Mhm. I hear you.
And
Thank you. I just wanted
I-
that clarity.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Brian?
Can I clarify something there? Then Prop B is not contingent on the passage of A.
I would agree.
You would go ahead and remove that because you wouldn't need it. The
I
66
would
passenger
agree.
is not contingent on the two vans. If the 66 passenger is not in A, then it doesn't need, then B does not need to be contingent on A.
It does, because if everyone voted on B, then we would not have the two vehicles that we need to transport. So it's an either
Hmm.
or scenario. So if let's say
Oh, I
everybody
see what
said,
you
I
mean.
don't want,
Okay.
I don't, okay.
So
safety
we
net.
need to make sure that people say yes to A
Yes.
Right,
so that we
That's
have the two
critical.
vans.
right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, if I could just for a moment, and I know we're sort of still trying to drill down on what exactly the propositions would be. It is worth considering that, you know, we have heard about the possibility of leasing and of having that in as a proposition as well. And I think I want to hear what people's thoughts are in regard to leasing as a concept, right? Because the proposition would be just that. It would be a proposition for us to enter into a 5-year lease agreement that would not exceed X amount, but we would need to bid for that. It's not a, you know, none of that is set in stone. We need to figure out the details of that, but just the outline of it would be a 5-year lease, not to exceed X total amount. But I think philosophically, to a certain extent, the board needs to think about whether leasing is a route we want to move in versus owning our buses.
One thing that's good about leasing is that with a new technology, it gives you the opportunity to sort of swap out the buses as they change. Instead of buying it for 12 years, if it's a 5-year lease, then, you know, you can upgrade the vehicles after that. It's not as long a commitment.
Anyone else with thoughts on leasing? We're all
I'm
quiet all of a
pretty
sudden.
comfortable with the numbers as far as buying, and you know, with the payback that it gives us and the grants that are potentially available to us. I'm comfortable with those, and I you know, the lease, yeah, it does it. Basically, we just keep paying what we're paying now, right? I mean, they're gonna build some kind of a payment plan that's kind of like similar to what we're paying now. And so there's no long-term, there's no financial difference to us, which I guess is sort of nice and risk-free. But I like the future of this, as far as actually reducing our costs if we buy.
Neil?
Yeah, I mean, I originally was excited about the proposition of leasing, and then I have had second thoughts. First off, as Brian said, you will, you're going to pay about the same. And then at the end, it's like leasing a car. You might have an option to buy, you might not have an option to buy, but they take the car back. You got nothing. And they also take the infrastructure back. They will take the chargers back because it's their chargers, and I don't know what they do about the pipes in the ground. So that is a concern. I also, am impressed with what Rochelle said with regard to maintaining a fleet with all one manufacturer. Because this is different than leasing a car, because you're going to have a number of years and a number of vehicles, whether it's 8, 9, 10, 15, that you're going to get from the leasing company, and that's going to raise your cost pretty substantially. I think one of the things that we might have seen was perhaps leasing would be $130,000 a year. Okay, so you think about that, 5 years, you've spent, what is that, $650,000 in lease payments, and you have nothing but, you've had that for 5 years. If we really knew that 5 years from now you could buy the equivalent thing for $50,000 and say, bye-bye lease, but I don't know that's going to work. The last thing is, I think it's going to be very confusing. You got Proposition A, B, C, and D talking about buying buses. And you're saying, Proposition E, give us authority to lease. And people are going to look at it and be very confused about what they're asking for. They're not getting direction from the board, which is our job to do. And so after I thought about all of it, I am not, I can be convinced otherwise, but at the moment, I'm not in favor of adding this as an additional proposition.
Okay. Iris, Josh?
Sarah, if I could I just wanted to speak to that total cost of ownership because I'm uneasy with it. So at this point, even with the funding, the total cost of ownership will be greater with the electric vehicles if we held on to them for 10 years. I just want to make that clear. So estimates say that the total cost of ownership, or at least the maintenance and the fuel costs, are between 25 and 30% less than a gas-powered vehicle or diesel. So our annual cost is, let's say, $8,000. So over the life of the vehicle, it would be tops, let's say, $20,000. We would reduce our maintenance and fuel costs. The vehicle is still costing $168 more than that. So spread out over the life. I just wanted to make that clear. However, there are environmental benefits, and it is a decision that, being a first mover is going to cost more money, obviously. And then with regard to the lease, I understand Neil's point. And just so that everyone else is aware, in order to enter into a lease, you need board authorization, providing it's over 1 year. By placing this on the ballot, it gives the board authority, if their financing models are changing and are becoming more lucrative and are more beneficial, it gives us the option of entering into the lease. And of course, the lease option is faster implementation, because we could never purchase the vehicles at this rate and have an implementation of 5 vehicles at a time or 10 vehicles at a time. And it also is the turnkey solution with regard to the training and the infrastructure, et cetera. Financing models, hybrid models, are going to be popping up like wildfire now, with everything that's going on in New York State and the initiative to advance EV technology. So that was just giving us the option, should something either through Highland or another leasing company after a full bid, it would just give us that option. I just want to make it clear, it's not about entering into a lease.
No, and I understand that, but it's still a question of confusion.
Yeah.
And I think voters will have if they see everything on the ballot and they're going to say, whoa, what are you buying, leasing? What are you doing? I can't vote for, I don't know what I'm voting on. And that's really a concern, because if you're right that things will be popping up and we should decide, because we've got maybe 0, maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 vehicles, if we decide, you know what, we'll ask the voters a year from now, we can do it then when the landscape is a lot clearer for the leasing option. And then we have vehicles that perhaps other districts will buy from us if we want to go leasing. So there are, yeah.
For information, in the lease, you determine what vehicles you want. You pick your vendor and you determine how you want to go. So
in other words, you can pick Bluebird and you can pick a 24.
Yes.
Iris or Josh, thoughts, comments?
I'm fine with leasing or not leasing.
I don't feel strongly either
That
way.
doesn't really help me one way or the other.
I mean, I have to admit, there is a
Unlike the
compelling.
others, I'm fine with leasing. There are, our administration and our administrators are spending a lot of time, and those costs are not measurable. And if we had someone else managing this entire process, I'm fine with it.
I agree to a certain extent with Iris on this. I think there's a certain advantage in having somebody else manage it for us. On the other hand, I know that the companies that manage things like that are always taking a profit. And you don't get anything for free. The question is whether, if we're making a bet on leasing, really what we're doing is we're making a bet that they can provide it at a better economy of scale, and that frankly, we can reduce our own staff expense by doing that. That's really what the bet is.
No, because
What you
remember,
do-
they're not servicing the vehicles. They reimburse us for our staff to service the vehicle.
I agree. We don't lose it. We're not saving on maintenance staff. What we're saving on is on the institutional knowledge. We're basically what we're getting from them is their institutional knowledge, right? But they're building the institutional knowledge rather than us building the institutional knowledge. And this is okay. There's a reason why we've never gone with leasing for our buses before. Why we have an in-house transportation system and we don't, contract out. And it's because, frankly, we think our use case is sufficiently unusual, and we think that our use case, and we think that it's worth investing in our in-house knowledge of this. And so that sort of leans me back towards the purchasing side of things versus the leasing side of things. If the board as a whole wanted to go with leasing, I could align behind it, but I'm more inclined to own than to buy.
So right now, I am hearing there two. No, don't. I'm not really. I don't think we should go in the direction of leasing. Let's not put that proposition on the ballot. Right. I've heard that. I think from Neil and from Brian. No. And Iris and Josh didn't really give me an answer.
If you add on the part about the being, I'm going to give you an answer.
Yeah,
I'm going to say don't put it on. And the reason I'm going to say don't put it on is because it's yet one more piece of confusion for our public. I think if we want to do this, we do it.
And I'm not ready to do it. I think the leasing market is too underformed to be able to do it now. And I think the confusion issue that I pointed out and Josh agrees is very significant.
They seem like, I got to be honest with you, they seem like very slick salesmen.
To be clear, Any leasing agreement would go to bid. We are not discussing a lease
I
agreement at this
I
point.
under-
We're
I
discussing
understand
the
that.
idea of going to bid for a lease, not
Yeah.
on a specific, on
Yeah.
any sort of a specific agreement with any specific company.
Totally agree.
Debbie, you were muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. That's very important. It is about the leasing concept.
Exactly.
Right.
Andrea,
Absolutely.
your thoughts on, I know you had said, noted the benefits of the concept, but
or a benefit. I'm leaning towards purchase because I really believe what Josh just brought up, that it is part of our culture to own our vehicles and to really know them. And since the whole leasing service is being sort of sorted out, as Neil said, we could use it for future vehicles, but I think starting out with an electric vehicle that we can really have hands-on with and build that institutional knowledge would be important.
I just to one thing that I think we were told, or I've heard this from somebody, is if we had our own vehicles and leased vehicles, you would not be able to use their infrastructure that you're leasing for your owned vehicles. Because they're making the money on the electricity that's saved, and they don't want, so you'd in essence have two parallel systems, a charger over there that we own and a charger over there on the other side that they provide, that the leasing company provides. It becomes complicated, but that's why you could conceivably, if you went to a lease, you could say, we got vehicles to sell. There'll be people out there who want to buy them if we go to the leasing down the road.
It's sort of like doing a pilot with these, hopefully 3 vehicles to see how it goes.
Right.
so I think, so now I've heard from everyone for what it's worth, and though I think we've got 4 people who have clearly said no to the concept, I tend to lean away from leasing currently. I think there will be a lot more financing models that are going to probably start popping up as this becomes a little bit more mainstream. And so I think we'd be better served if that's something that we decide we want to do to round out or to fill out our fleet at some point, we maybe reconsider it. But right now, I think we're better off going the purchase route and making that commitment and moving in that direction. So I think we settled that proposition. We will not have a leasing proposition on the ballot. We've settled that, and that brings us then back to our A, B, C, and D. And so I heard from Neil with regard to A, in that you would prefer to keep it at those 2 vehicles, the 20 and the 30. So that would be a not to exceed $113,000. Right,
Yeah.
for the 2.
Yep. Yeah. My only other question would be, do we want to put B as the 66 passenger bus and C and D as the smaller vans, or put the large bus at the bottom?
Well, I think let's get settled on A first before we move
Okay.
on. Let's get settled on A.
Sarah,
Iris?
can I ask Denise a quick question that before we go into the propositions? Denise, I know we had other, specifically, I'll just talk about the turf field. And that was going to be something we were going to bond. How's that going to impact if we bond over 700 now?
I believe, just looking at something here.
Because that was about $1 million. And we said, we made a conscious effort that we weren't going to bond that high this year. So I'm just curious, if we end up bonding that high this year, what happens to something like that project? Because I am concerned that we have been somewhat lobbied on this issue that the other organizations may not have been lobbying us on. And I don't want to move priorities around.
Understood, Iris. It would depend, of course, on the cost of the turf field.
Yeah, it was about $1 million, I thought they were talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that number is probably very different now, 2 years later. We also have the EPC, the energy performance contract. So that is financing as well. So factoring in this large future van purchases, because remember, this is going to cover us for next fiscal year, but we have a fleet replacement plan that we've implemented so that the community doesn't get hit with, no buses this year, and then next year they have 5 buses. So that is going to be an ongoing cost, in addition to the EPC, which will I'm just looking at our refunding
I don't
bond.
need a specific number. I just want an understanding, a general knowledge. What does banding this much do to future projects that might require bonding? Will it hamper us, or we have enough things rolling off that we don't need to worry about something like that?
We have potential for additional bonding for a turf field, depending upon the full financing of the EPC. We are crafting that financing now so that it falls within our tax cap and balances the debt with our building aid. So all of that, there's a lot of different factors, but yes, I believe we have the capacity.
Denise, if I could add to what Iris is saying, because again, I know I don't want to complicate the evening, but the board has engaged in an in-depth review of a future turf. We said that in 22-23, my understanding that there was, use the word considerable amount dropping off, that might be a target for the board to focus on turf. And that is why we wanted to, if the budget would allow now, to start doing some investigative work on the location and what else might be involved. When the board is ready to make that move, we would have all of this background stuff done to position us well when that debt dropped off.
So what I was going to ask, and I guess this really follows through with what you've just said, is if we had kind of a 5-year or 10-year projection based on the borrowing we have now and when different bonding will drop off, so we can see, as you said, there's we understand that there's a large amount of debt that will be dropping off in 22-23, which goes to Iris's question. But is that something that is available and easy for you to circulate, Denise? In other words,
Not at this point, Neil, because we're still developing the energy performance contract bonding. So once we incorporate that, of course,
then it will be available. Okay.
It will be available also once this is determined, because if this is 113,000, it's very different than if it were 650,000 or 700,000. So, and also the rates that we're getting, we're trying to refinance the existing EPC that we have and roll into the new one. There are a lot of things at play.
So Iris, to your point, although we know we've tabled this is the turf, referring to what you were referring to. We have continued the dialogue internally to see when that opportune time would be, and perhaps the next steps, and they'll look at even capital. And so again, I don't want to promise anything, right? Because there are ongoing conversations that I know the board was extremely interested in, and we have not really stopped internally looking at ways that that might and could come to fruition.
So the quick
Thank
answer
you.
to your question, Iris,
There's never a quick
That-
answer.
that even with these unknowns, there is still capacity within our debt schedule.
Because Denise, it's true that if we don't have a certain level of debt, it actually affects the tax cap.
Yes.
So it's almost like preferable. It sounds crazy, but it's almost preferable to keep your level of debt at a certain level.
We have to.
Yeah, because that's
Or else
the
our
purpose.
tax cap would be hit considerably, yes.
Right. And you remember the turf task force did make that as a recommendation. I know I shouldn't say I know because I haven't seen the recommendations. Our athletic council is examining all things athletics, and, so, it's very much on our minds on how to hit that sweet spot and when that is.
Yeah.
So just so that I'm clear, because I'm not at this point. So are we including the 66 passenger gas or diesel powered vehicle in the first proposition or not?
We only
no.
heard from Neil so
Neil
far.
says no. Brian, no. Iris, no. Andrea, no. Josh?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
The 66 passenger vehicle, would you include that in Proposition A, or would you just keep it at the 2 small gas vehicles?
Sarah, what do you think?
I'm
If you say no, then it doesn't matter. What
I
Josh
say no, but Josh still gets to give his vote.
I just wonder if not including it there confuses matters even more.
I don't think it confuses matters. I mean, that's my view. I don't think it confuses matters because I think it shows these are the vehicles that we need to maintain our fleet to get our kids to school when school starts. This is what we need, right? This is our critical need, and we need for the community to understand that. And so
yeah,
I think
but we've also just talked about how we really don't want to go another 12 months with it.
Right, but Josh, we also said that if we need a replacement, rather than buying a bus, we can get a short-term loan lender or lease from the manufacturer, from Bluebird.
Mhm.
And so that we're saying to the public, we've got that option. And that's what Rochelle has kind of given that commitment, because that's why I feel it gets more confusing if you put it in than if you leave it out.
Andrea,
mute.
you're on mute.
You're muted, Andrea.
Andrea,
Andrea,
You're muted.
Sorry. I just got the
It's
message.
okay.
But there's additional funding that's available now. That's the thing, is possibly, likely, maybe,
no.
Are you talking
I'm
about
not
electric?
just talking about taking the electric bus out of the equation. I'm saying we don't want to put a 66 passenger gas/diesel bus in that Proposition A.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood.
So we're all clear
I'm
on
okay.
that. Prop A,
I'm okay with that.
not to exceed 113,000 for the purchase of a 20 passenger and a 30 passenger vehicle.
Okay, and
And-
I just would caution everyone that we don't want to label these propositions yet. These are not going to
True.
be.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
going
These are not necessarily the numbers for them, but for the purpose of our discussion right now, A
Yeah.
is that. Okay?
okay.
So
and-
then it comes down to it comes to B, C, and D are respectively the 66 passenger electric vehicle, a 27 passenger electric vehicle, and a 24 passenger electric vehicle. Okay, So, and understanding that inclusive of each of those, because we are separating them out into separate propositions, there is charging and infrastructure costs that are built into that because they're separate, we need to build it into each one of them. But again, the propositions are all written as not to exceed amounts. So they are not saying this is specifically the amount we are bonding for. We can't bond for more than this amount. But those numbers can fluctuate and go lower depending on
A lot of things.
right. And each of those would one, be contingent upon the passage of Proposition A, and B, also be contingent on the funding, the grant funding. Okay,
So I'll-
everybody following so far?
I will
Iris?
go on the record because I think I'm going to be the only one that'll say this. So I have no problem with the electric bus, 66 passenger. I am not in favor of the other two. It's just too much money. So I'm not in favor of putting out a bond total of over $600,000 or $700,000. So A is the 66 passenger bus is okay with me. The other two, I'm not in favor of the alternative propositions, but I don't think anyone else has that position. So you can probably go much quicker with everyone.
All right. Does anyone have any questions with regard to each of those individual propositions?
No.
Okay.
Not a,
Neil, you had mentioned something about whether you question whether that 66 passengers should go first or should go last. I actually like where it is as the second placement, given it is our largest grant funding potential. I prefer to keep it in that second
Okay,
position.
I was just thinking
But
about
that's
it,
just
but
me.
that's fine. Nope.
And
I-
Sarah, you were in support of B, C, and D.
I am in support of B, C, and D, with the understanding that it will require some, voter education on our
Right,
part in
okay.
order to make sure everything is understandable.
And the rest of the board, I want to make sure we're clear so that we're preparing everything properly for Thursday night. Everybody else, B, C, and D, okay?
I'm clear and in favor of those. Yes.
Okay.
Alrighty, so that
All
is
right.
then everyone else. Also, just so we can get clear too, with regard to the grant funding, I would like to Iris's point, to adjust that, I think it's listed right now in our hypotheticals under Prop C, adjust that grant funding amount down to
To the 90.
$90,000.
To the 90.
Okay.
Understood.
Everyone's good with that? Brian,
Sure.
you're good with that? All right.
Denise,
Yeah.
did you get that? Yes, okay.
Now, with that said, have we addressed have we given the administration all of the recommendations that you were looking for from us this evening?
I believe so. Denise, are you in good shape?
I believe so, yes. We will get this to our bond counsel first thing in the morning. And providing there are no other questions or concerns, what I would like to do is once we get the propositions written up, I'd like to send them to the board for review, just to make sure there are a lot of components here. Just want to make sure that the implications are clear and everyone's on board with that. Okay.
Absolutely.
So there is one person who hasn't said a word in 2.5 hours.
John.
But he's been taking it all in.
Yeah, I don't know if he has anything he wants to say.
That's just a picture of him. He's really not there.
You should see the copious notes that I have. Everything is verbatim. That's what was keeping me so busy. No, I concur. I think where we're landing, we had a pre-meeting and my feelings are aligned with where the board is hitting. So I'm actually quite aligned with the proceedings. So I think we're in a good spot.
And
Okay.
Iris, thank you for bringing up turf, because I wouldn't want people to think that that's not on our minds just because we are having a discussion about other items. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
And I would just like to say thank you to Rochelle. Rochelle has been all consumed with this for over a year. I mean, the amount of learning and the amount of information that she's acquired to make sure that she's educated on this. I mean, she has been all in since the beginning, and I just really want to thank her.
And that's Rochelle's MO. She's always
Yes.
like that. So thank you.
And even though she does all that, she can still bake Irish soda bread.
That's
I
right.
know.
At least
Yeah, you're
I
gonna
know
have
when
to
I call her
share
at
the
4 a.m. in the
recipe
morning, she's up doing electric bus stuff. So she's up and always.
No, I go to sleep thinking about it. My husband woke me up yesterday morning with the article from the newspaper. Don't get up. You don't want to see this. Look, the whole thing is, it's a team. I've been on the phone hours with Denise. I've hunted down everywhere. I've called in every favor to get people to sit and talk. I just want to know that we've done our due diligence. We have a great operation. We want to make sure that we're taking care of it and making the best decision for the taxpayers, for the kids, for everything, and that we're going to be sustainable. That's all. That's all I want. And I'm comfortable to stay with Bluebird. I know they're going to get us through this. So, look, everybody's pitched in. Nobody operates by themselves. We're all together here. We all suffer equally. Denise, you suffer a little more. Dr. O'Connell, I'm going to miss you in the middle of the night.
She can call
I
you
can still
anyone.
call you.
Well, the old supervisor, every time it snowed, he would call up and leave a message for us that I would get at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking about you. Be safe out there. So,
That's nice.
oh, yeah, George Morgan did that for years. All right, thank you, everybody. I know that this has been very, very difficult. You've gotten a ridiculous amount of pressure from the community. Don't fold now. You've made up your mind. You've set your sail. You're on your course. Don't let anybody push you and say, oh, it's got to be done tomorrow. It's got to be done. We're going to do it right. And if it's done right, it's worth taking our time. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Rochelle.
Rochelle.
All right. Do I have any other questions? Anything else for?
No, but this
I'm curious
was a
about.
well-spent evening.
I want to know about hydrogen school buses. Has anybody looked into this?
Brian, it's
I actually did some research on this. The problem is that hydrogen is a very, very, very small molecule, which means that storing hydrogen is really, really, really hard. It leaks away.
All right.
Brian,
Okay, I didn't mean to.
Right.
I didn't mean to introduce anything. It was entirely in jest.
I didn't mean to split
know.
atoms, but let's get moving.
Oh, with that said, then, recommended action that the Board of Education adjourns the meeting at 10:04 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carried. Thank you all very much for
Thank you.
Thank you so
working
much.
with
There
us
was
on
so
this.
much.
And
Aye.
thank you
Thanks.
to Rochelle and
Thanks.
Denise